course.
The desire to observe facts leads to a system which veils all reality. To make fact a criterion means its denial as fact. When you make fact the ultimate rule, you start treating as fact. You turn to a pool for pushing your system. A tool for pushing your system. When you turn facts into a total system, it stops seeing facts clearly. Once you build a big, all encompassing system, you stop seeing facts as they really are. You see them through the system's filter. When you treat facts like tools to prove your system, they stop being facts, they become propaganda. So you can't prove your system with facts. So, welcome.
Oh, sorry, you believe in Christianity?
What's that?
You believe in Christianity?
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Okay. What exactly do you believe in? Are you Catholic? Are you? Do you believe in the Trinity?
Yes.
Can you explain the Trinity?
There are three distinct persons or roles that are united in one Godhead.
What do person mean?
What?
What does person mean?
Person?
Yeah.
The persons are like roles. You think there's three different roles?
Can you say beings?
Beings. There's seats of intellect, I guess.
So do you believe there are three beings?
There's three different roles united in one Godhead.
I'm saying, do you believe person mean beings?
I wouldn't. No, I told you it's a role.
Okay. Now, do you believe that Jesus Christ is 100% God?
No.
No?
God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You can't separate them.
But I'm saying, is Jesus himself 100% God?
No. So you can't separate the persons in the Godhead. God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You can't separate them.
Oh, thank you. So when God became a man, was it only Jesus Christ?
I don't understand.
So when God became a man, did you separate them at that point? When God became a man?
No. The Son incarnated in a man named Jesus.
So did the Father also incarnate into a man?
No.
No, okay. So in that sense, they are separated. They are divided.
Yeah, they're three distinct persons united in one Godhead.
So can you say the Father is the only true God?
No, the Father isn't
Okay.
God unless it has the Son and the Holy
Okay,
Spirit.
thank you.
God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's
Thank
God.
you. Can you go to John something 3?
No,
Why?
because you're going to hell. Marxism, again, okay, so Marxism. When you make fact the ultimate rule, you stop treating it as fact. You turn it into a tool for pushing your system, and that means it's no longer just a fact. For me, simple, everyday reality is a given factor, a presence that precedes my own, a nexus of situations in relation to which, as men, we have to take a stance, to act, and to decide. Hence, reality is always a resistance, opposition, and contradiction. It is resolved neither by denial, idealism, nor by submission. Uh,
Me?
what?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point. Jesus never treated anybody the way you treated that last guy. That was a little rude, and I think we can all do a little better of loving our neighbor.
What was rude?
You didn't take what he was saying seriously, which if you're having a conversation, you need to give him respect.
Hold on. Isn't it rude of him? Because is one of my topics like let's debate the Trinity? Is that a topic that I have listed in the Trinity? Is that a topic that I have listed in the background? Isn't that rude for him to try to talk over my
It's
show?
you
That's
you
not
are
the
having a conversation with the guy.
Jimmy, the
That's,
Trinity, Jimmy, that's not a topic of my show. So wouldn't it be rude of him to just like insert a new topic that I'm not here to talk about the Trinity. Isn't that rude? of
I
him?
can definitely understand that point, but then you should ask him and not tell him he's going to hell for it.
Oh my god, that's my catchphrase. I tell everyone they're going to hell. And if he doesn't believe in the Trinity, he's going to hell. Do you disagree? Are you a Christian?
I do not disagree.
Well, then there you go. What's wrong? That's what the Bible says.
Yeah, but we must be gentle with our neighbors, right? If it causes them to falter, then it's not good for us to do it.
I listened to him talk. And then he wanted like, I'm not here. This is not a place to debate scripture. Like, I don't know why you're doing this. This is my live as I talk to non-believers, atheists and agnostics. I'm not here to preach, to teach the gospel, right? I'm not here to debate other Christians. So like, I think you're just embarrassing Christ by coming up here and trying to argue with me in front of people. Like, this is a place for non-believers to learn about Christ.
But we must act in the footsteps of Christ. And Christ never treated anybody that way.
Off my stage.
See, Christ, he exposed truth and walked on it. And he also did not curse at people.
You're going to hell. You're going to hell.
What's going on, man? How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. So, I have like a pragmatic belief in Christianity, but I take it your life is like a knowledge thing, right? Like it's primarily a theological argument.
I mean, that's not real. Like, to be a Christian, like, God's real. It's not just like something that's like useful or something.
Well, when I say pragmatic, I mostly meant like I believe it, I grew up with it, but like as I study theology, I'm just trying to justify God's existence. And there's like some ways, but like I don't know, like I don't know if I could consider myself agnostic properly if I like practice Christianity, but like, I don't, you know what I'm saying?
God doesn't submit to a human standard. You know what I'm saying? Like, God is justified by his self-authenticating, self-attesting revelation.
Well, when I say I'm saying like I'm justified to myself because like that's basically why I came up here, because I want to learn arguments, like, learn more about theology, so I can like find strength in my belief. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Well, here I do the transcendental argument for God.
Yeah, like tag.
Yeah.
So do you have a specific version of it you use?
There's not one. You can do it in a million ways, but so we basically just show that any non-Christian system fails to account for things like logic, morality, and knowledge. And so only the Christian worldview can succeed in grounding or accounting for these things. So it's not really a classical proof per se. It's a transcendental collapse of any alternative to Christianity. So
when you say logic, does that take do you have a specific framework of logic you appeal to describe reality?
no, just the possibility of any logical framework. Doesn't have to be any.
Oh, so anyway. So how does God, how does that existing or us being able to reason necessitate God's existence exactly?
So like logic would be an absolute truth, or it's like universal, unchanging, eternal, necessary truth. And so you're going to need like an absolute foundation. So God is like the necessary feature.
So you're saying like they're axioms of logic that are universal? that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
logic is, for one, logic is universally binding. Like,
Right.
so
So you're saying like the axioms. So like there are other like that's what I was basically asking. Are there specific axioms you think or hold to be universal? And if so, like how do you think? Why do you think those are
no,
universal?
I'm saying that, okay. So there's like, we have a blueprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a concept of a bridge or something. And then you have someone who takes the blueprint and like constructs the bridge. And then, so there's the idea of the bridge, the concept, and then there's the concrete physical bridge in reality. So the laws of logic are abstractions. That means they're concepts, yet they have real world, they're truths about reality. So we have to make the concepts real. That means grounded. And because
Okay. Oh, wait. So
God makes logic true. He makes logic real. Without God, what would make logic true or real? And they have nothing.
well, when you say you're referring to like the laws of thought, right? So like identity, non-contradiction, through the middle.
Yeah, typically, yeah.
Yeah, so classical logic. Well, the thing
Non-contradiction.
I believe like there's I don't see the necessity of these things being like universally applicable. I think logic is just the study of how we ought to reason, and we use those axioms like or classical logician because we find
Okay. See, and then you just shoot yourself in the foot, right? Because so what you're saying is that we don't need to be logically consistent, and if we don't need to be logically consistent, how are you even arguing with me, doofus? If we don't have to be logically consistent, if it's not universal, I can just say God exists because God exists. There's no reason to be consistent. You just do whatever the hell you want. That is not how logic works. It wouldn't function like that. Like traffic isn't going to function if everyone in their car is just like doing whatever the hell they want. They have to follow universal rules. If you deny that, traffic doesn't function. Same thing with logic. It won't function without universal rules.
Well, yeah, you would need some axioms for any framework, like I'm a paraconsistent logician, right? So you need axioms in order to justify.
It's not about axioms. It's about the necessary precondition to even have a freaking axiom.
Well, yeah, what you're saying is
Yeah.
So what you're saying is
laws
that
of logic,
the three laws of thought are taken as axioms.
What makes logic real? What makes logic real that's not God?
Well, I think those are mutual correspondences we agree upon because they're either pragmatic or because that's how we evaluate things in the domain of rationality.
Okay, but that's but that's bullshit. You don't live your life like that. You drive over the bridge because you trust the laws of logic to keep the bridge from collapsing. So you can like sit here and like lie to my audience and lie to me, but you don't live your life like that. So you're just a full of shit bullshitter. Just like all of the other ones. Because it's so freaking obvious. Like, I'm looking at a tree right now. Do you think the tree is real?
That's like a solipsism position. You don't need to...
Blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at... Look, let's just cut the bullshit, dude. I'm looking at a tree. Let's cut the bullshit. I'm looking at a tree right now.
Okay.
Do you think the tree is real that I'm looking at?
I think that if it is real, right, let's just presuppose it is real.
Get the fuck off my panel. You're going to hell.
Bro, that guy was lost.
What a dumbass. You got dog walked.
Hey, you ask, is a tree real? And he goes, well, let me qualify. Yeah, logic is the vehicle of the conversation highway. And that's what he doesn't understand.
Yeah, he's throwing metaphysical punches and then saying I'm not in the metaphysical fight. You know, logic is just this thing that I use, you know.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a degree more useless than underwater basket weaving? Being a paraconsistent logician. I got a pair of something consistent for you.
Even paraconsistent logic is going to have some principles that are like universal and unchanging and
well, he just denies the principle of explosion, which is like crazy because his whole worldview just exploded.
Yeah, there was a transcendental collapse.
I'm just here for your algorithm, though.
What does that mean?
I'm just here to boost. I don't know. I'm just chilling. I want to dunk on some atheists with you.
Welcome, Ellen. And they ran away. They're scared of you.
You think so?
Yeah. Well,
Hey,
welcome.
hey,
Hey,
who says science is a theistic concept?
I do.
Why would you say that? Well, first I need to know what you mean by theistic. What does theism mean to you?
There's a God world, and then there's a non-God world. And if we lived in the non-God world, science would be impossible. So we must live in the God world because science is possible.
My question was, what does theism mean to you? What does the word define theism?
You know
Theist.
what theism means? It just means someone who believes in God. Or,
It don't necessarily mean which God. You know, it just means they believe in God. That's theism, right?
right?
Yeah, all the gods that have ever been dreamed of or thought about or followed have all fell under theism.
Nah, well, there's classical theism would be like that God is a mind that is the ground of being. That's what I would mean, right? Like there's a
Right, right. I was just establishing another point that I think you do agree with, that all the gods that have ever been dreamed up or discovered or claimed have fall under theism. That's theistic belief.
okay. I'm telling you, yeah, I'm specifically referring to the a mind that would be the ground of being when we talk about God. So science requires a mind that is the ground of being.
Right. Science is a theistic concept.
Bro, yes.
Yeah, well, evidently it's not, because
Oh,
you
really?
just admitted that all the gods, all the mythologies, fall under theism, right?
Uh-huh.
You know who Joseph Campbell is?
No.
He wrote The Power of Myth, and
Okay.
he was interested in the American
What does
Indian
that
as
have
a
to do
child.
with the price of tea in China?
Well, well, you'll have to connect the dots. You can't interrupt me. I can tell you how to get to Birmingham, but if we get to Adamsville and you want to know what that's got to do with something, you won't. I won't. You won't ever get the rest of the directions.
Are you
So
saying science is possible without God?
repeat that.
Are you claiming you could do science in the non-God world?
You can do science in any God world.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, that's what I
Wait,
thought.
how old was that guy? I thought people over 50 were automatically Christian.
He was super old, it sounded like. Welcome,
Hello.
welcome, Noah.
Hi. So I heard you talking a couple of minutes ago with a guy like I mean it was basically a transcendental argument about like you need to presuppose logic to is that what you were basically arguing? You need to presuppose logic and if
No, that
you ground that
logic
in God.
logic is an abstraction, but we need something to make it real, or else it's just like floating around in your model of reality. You need to anchor it, ground it, make it
Yeah,
real.
so right. So I could I could agree to that. I could agree that you need some grounding for that, which could be a deity. Just the problem is, I don't see how that exactly proves it's Yahweh or it's like a Christian God.
Because only the Christian God has the revealed perfect attribute set that would be the necessary precondition to have logic.
So yeah, so like, could you explain? So you're saying specifically logic, not morality or anything like that?
Well, I would say morality would be included, so it'd be like logic, morality, science.
Yeah.
No.
So the reason I asked that is because I could agree with you that I believe that there is a God who grounds logic, so we have a coherent world. But I don't think you're able to ground morality, and therefore, if you can't ground morality, you can't ground it in the Christian God. If you get what I'm saying?
Why can't I ground morality in God's holy character?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would just say it's kind of arbitrary. So like if in so for the sake of argument, I think we have to ground logic because it's the only way to have coherence and for us to even deny logic would be to use it. It's a necessary axiom and the only way we can ground that axiom is a God. But we could live in a world in which the axiom of morality is not necessary. So,
No, no,
uh
because
yeah, you go ahead.
logic,
Why?
logic would require a moral absolute to get a universal standard.
Yeah, so what do you mean by that?
Logic in ethics, they go hand. You can't have one without the other, because you would get your universal standard that for logic from ethics.
You're saying, what do you mean by universal standard? Universal standard for what?
The rules of logic, because rules are something like you ought follow the law of non-contradiction, or you ought follow the law of the excluded middle. It's not just
Yeah, but those are logical oughts. Those aren't like ethical oughts.
No, they are ethics. Oughts are ethics.
So you're saying if I say you ought to say 2 + 2 = 4 instead of 5, based off logical rulings, that's still ethics?
Yes, they're reciprocal. You can't.
But when I'm saying the term moral, so you're saying morality is still applicable in terms of logic.
Yeah, because you like value the true over the false. Value is ethics. Or like if you
Sorry, go.
If you make an argument, I can just go, ought I believe your argument? And if you can't provide like an objective standard for why I ought to believe your argument, then your argument has no force.
Yeah, sure, but I would say objective, as in the sense of using logical terminology. We could use logical terminology to say you ought to believe something based off rules of logic, but we can't get an is from an ought. Like I can't.
Your knowledge would be morally unmoored. There'd be, okay, it's true, but why should I care it's true? There's no reason to believe something that's true. I might as well just believe things that are false, because it doesn't make any difference, because there's no oughts. So you can't have knowledge without morals. We need moral realism. So like the people who argue for moral anti-realism is just like a total contradiction. Because then they'll sit there and argue like knowledge exists. But if you say take moral anti-realism route, knowledge doesn't exist. There's no universal standard for true and false or right and wrong.
So when you're saying morality, what are you saying when you're saying morality? Because when I'm saying morality, I'm thinking things like
oughts.
Yes. So you're just. So why is it not possible that we live in a world where there are objective facts and objective logical truths, but people just don't necessarily need to believe in them?
Because then the knowledge would be morally unmoored, and it doesn't make sense. Like, why even try to figure out what's true if it doesn't even matter? So that doesn't make sense. You need oughts. Like, everyone lives as if you ought to believe true things, and you value like true more than false.
Sure, yes, but just because everybody lives a certain way doesn't necessarily means it's a necessary condition.
If you deny that, well, then it just means that you're basically, cognitive dissonance, or like philosophically schizophrenic, or you're just like really confused, because your beliefs don't match how you live your life or reality.
Why does one's beliefs need to match how they live life or reality? You can
I don't know. Presumably, you'd want to be an authentic person and not fake. But I guess
I don't think that's authentic. So, like for example, somebody who is like a determinist can live their life like believing they have free will, even if they logically know that they do not have free will. Correct?
Yeah, but that's inauthentic. You're not being consistent. That's a contradiction. Why would you do that?
But how would you live your life like you not only do you not have free will, but like if it's an axiom that you don't have free will,
This is crazy. This is schizophrenia. You're trying to argue for schizophrenia.
How is that arguing for schizophrenia?
Because you're saying, like, let's just disconnect our beliefs from reality. Why can't I just disconnect my beliefs from reality? Like, this is just goofy. Why do you argue like this? Why don't you just be a normal person with, like, try to be reasonable?
It's not that I'm actually trying not to be reasonable. I'm just trying to come. I'm trying to use the forms in which we are able to determine reason and find conclusions. And if I'm drawing conclusions from those that don't match reality, well, it doesn't really matter, because what I perceive reality as and what reality really is are two separate qualities, two separate things.
Okay, but this is just like goofy. This is just I don't even really want to talk to you anymore, because you're just being goofy. Come
on, man. Don't be like that.
Well, what do you want me to do? You're just denying reality. So, okay. Go talk to the flat earthers or something. There's a flat earth community out there for you, buddy. Welcome.
Hey, man.
Hey, dude.
Okay. I just have a few questions for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you understand that the laws of logic are just fundamental patterns in order for a conversation to work?
Laws of logic is correct thinking about the world.
Yes. Okay. And you understand logical claims require statements, right?
Well, the laws of logic would be truth statements. Yeah.
Okay. Can you have statements without humans?
Yeah.
You can have statements without humans? Who's making the statements?
The mind of God.
No, but tag is an argument to challenge atheism, so you cannot use God, right?
Wrong.
Wrong. Okay, dude. Listen, when you use tag to debunk atheism, right? You're
Tag is
trying to
about,
show that. Hmm?
yeah. Tag is
Hmm?
yeah. Tag is it's about worldviews that we have a starting point, and we say that if you don't start with faith in Christ to describe reality, then you'll have a transcendental collapse in your worldview.
Okay, and I'll show you why you can still ground logic and truth in the human mind. So,
Well, that's not
if
true.
logic, okay, I'm going to explain to you. That's the whole debate, right?
But you're lying because logic is a necessary truth, and human minds are contingent. So you can't have a necessary truth from contingent mind.
Okay, what is truth? Can you define truth for me?
Truth.
Yeah.
Well, it would be Jesus, right? Or that which corresponds to reality.
Okay, so truth is a statement that corresponds to reality.
Yeah.
Okay, and in a universe without a God, statements require humans. So that means truth requires humans, which means you can ground truth in the human mind, because it's just a human concept.
You can't. Human minds are contingent, and logic is necessary. It doesn't work.
Logic is necessary for human perspective, yes. It's a necessary tool for us to organize our observations.
Yeah, but it has to be true before you can even experience the world. Because you couldn't, if there was no law of identity, you couldn't even experience the world. What you're saying doesn't work. The human mind cannot ground logic. It doesn't work. I just told you the contradiction.
The human mind cannot create logic?
No. Because logic is absolute, universal, unchanging, eternal. Human minds are finite. Not absolute, unchanging, and eternal.
Okay, for you to show me that logic works out of the human mind.
Dude, do you think your thoughts make things true or false? What's true and false? Like, your thoughts shape reality. Do you think you're like telekinetic, or are you another crazy person? What is wrong with you? How could your thoughts make logic real? Your thoughts don't make things real, goof.
Yeah, that's not what my point is. Nice straw man. You haven't understood my point. I'll explain to you in a better way.
No, I understand your point. What you're saying is you're talking like a crazy person, as if you're
Okay, PMARS, calm down.
No,
all right?
No, I'm not going to calm down, because what
Do you understand that vision is a human concept?
Do you understand that logic is a concept and you have to make it real, and human minds can't make it real? That's the point.
PMARS.
Can your mind make logic real?
Hold on. I'm trying to explain to you why it does. Hold on.
I don't want to hear your stupidity. What are you talking about?
So you're not going to debate. You're not actually trying to debate someone.
Dude, answer my fucking question. Can your mind make logic real?
What do you mean by your question? Elaborate.
Fuck off. Can your mind make logic real?
That's not an elaboration. You just repeated your question. I'm asking for an elaboration of your question.
I'm going to just kick you then, I guess.
Okay, kick everybody that beats you in the debates. That's why you're going to lose respect. No one's going to believe in your little religion.
You're running away from my question.
I'm not running away. I'm asking you to clarify your question so I can answer it. I'm not.
Clarify what? It's a simple question. What makes logic real? Why does that need clarity? What makes it real? It's abstract. What makes it concrete? How do you need clarity there? Stop being goofy. You're sitting there telling me your thoughts make things real. You're a goof. Where do they grow these people? God. So annoying. Look, I just uploaded a podcast about all this that talks about all this. Everything what I'm saying right now. Yeah.
Deeper. That's the core of it. Yeah, this deep dive is all about exploring that connection logic and, well, the concept of God. And the main source.
But you drive over a bridge, dude, so you believe logic's real. What makes it real? Welcome, Gazoo.
Hey, I hope you're doing well. Sorry about that frustration. I just caught the tail end of that one. Your last guess up there.
Yeah, it's just really frustrating. They want to like try to teach me, and they say like crazy stuff, and they don't listen. So,
Well, you know, a lot of people throughout the last couple of years had asked me, personally had asked me, he said, Gazoo, why in the heck do you and Darth get along so well? Y'all don't, he never kicks you or anything. I said, look, there's a couple of basic rules. Don't overtalk him. And second one is that whenever he asks you a question, make sure that you address the answer in your response. That's simple. What's the problem with that?
yeah, well, it's kind of frustrating. I'm a lot more lenient than Darth too, because I don't really expect much from people. But like, it gets to a point where it's like, dude, you're like, we're not having a conversation because you're just ignoring what I'm saying, and it's like, it's frustrating. And not only that, that you know. What is it in the Tao Te Ching? It says those who speak don't know, those who don't speak know.
Yes,
Got all
that's
these
right.
people that like want to run their mouth and they don't know what they're talking about. And I've read literature on the subject matter, so I know they're full of crap.
Right.
And they get mad when I interrupt them. But it's like, dude, you're just BSing. Like, I know you're BSing. Like, stop.
It's like you don't have time for this going down this particular road. I get that. That's right.
Imagine someone tried to tell you how to run your electric plant and like acted like they knew everything, and you can tell because you're the one who actually does it that they're full of crap, right?
Right.
And that's frustrating when they act. You know what I'm saying? So
Exactly. No, it's been a few months since I've had the honor to actually engage with you. I just wanted to have just a minute to kind of log on, and I just want to say hi. I've got I'm headed out the door, but I just want to say that I really always appreciate listening to your channel there and your interactions.
all right, man. Thanks, Gazoo. Yeah, I saw you live last night. I was gonna stay high, but then I think it was really late. I fell asleep or something.
I hear you. Take care of yourself.
All right, take care, Gazoo. Bye. Yeah, I noticed Gazoo was on live, but I was like on my way to bed, so I should have said hi, but I didn't. I'm lazy. On Judgment Day, God's gonna be like, "Why are you so lazy?" I'll be like, "My bad, God. You got me on that one." Lazy. No, didn't I just talk to you?
What?
What? I don't know. What would you like to say, Noah?
I disagree.
You disagree? Yeah. Well, what do you disagree with?
Okay, I wanted to talk about the last prompt, that science is a theistic concept. Why do you think that science is a theistic concept?
I mean, I could draw a picture. Maybe that would help you understand.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
People like pictures. So science is like a study of the natural world. So let's say this is like the person, and they want to study the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is the world. They got to study that. So in order to study the world, your mind would have to be in contact with the objects of the world. Our mind has to be able to connect to the world to study the world. So because God creates our mind and God creates the world, do you see how there's now a connection between our mind and the world so we can know the world?
But there's only a connection between the mind and the world if God exists.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry. If God exists, then that itself is the connection between the mind and the world.
Because he created
If God doesn't exist,
now how do we connect them
then the
together?
connection between the mind and the world is direct.
Where's the connection? How do you connect them now?
Just draw a straight line across.
No, but what is connecting it?
the same line that connected God, I guess.
You denied the connection. God was the connection. Now what's the connection?
The human and the world.
What's the connection? God was. See, if I design puzzle pieces, they'll connect together because I designed them and I intend them to connect together. But you're denying that there's a design between your mind and the world. No, there's no designer that designed your mind and designed the world. So
I don't believe that
how do
there
they
is
connect?
a God, as you put it, or I couldn't say that
How do
that's
you,
the
you're
objective.
saying like we could grab two random puzzle pieces that aren't intended to fit together and they're just going to magically fit together? What you're saying doesn't make sense.
No, what I'm saying doesn't make sense. You're just disagreeing.
How does if my mind is not intended to fit to the world, how am I going to know the world? There's no connection there.
No, your mind can be intended to fit the world around you the same way
Well,
that
now you're saying there's a God.
nature exists. That doesn't mean you need a God to do it.
Nature
You don't
doesn't.
need a God to do that.
No. Nature doesn't intend anything. There's no intention in the world. God, if
Yes,
there's
because nature is irrational. That doesn't mean that you can't gain sentience
Yes,
and observe
exactly.
the world around you.
nature is irrational, so there's nothing intending your mind to connect to the objects of knowledge.
Yes, because nature is irrational doesn't mean that we can't use rationality in an unrational
It
world.
means there's nothing connecting your mind to the world. There's no, because in my model, there's a designer of both, so they fit together like puzzle pieces designed to fit together. You're saying
so that in
puzzle
itself
pieces,
is only because it's a fallible.
do you not understand this? Your position is, I take these two puzzle pieces. No one designed them to fit together, but they fit together because they just do. That doesn't make any sense. Do you not see
Well,
that?
it's just that it makes just as much sense as you saying the big man in
It
the
doesn't
sky.
make any sense. You're saying it
It's
just
of the
is.
same-
You're saying it
it's of
just
the
is.
same fallacy.
I'm saying they have a revealed designer.
Yes, but when you appeal to a god, that in itself is just as irrational as me saying they just do. Does that make sense?
It is not, because I have an
Because you're using-
explanation. Because I have an
Because you're using
explanation.
God,
Dude,
to justify
no,
an irrational
no,
answer
and again,
makes
lie,
it
and again,
just as
lie.
fallacious
You're
as
just
me
lying.
saying it just
Okay.
does. Because you just appealing to God,
You're just lying, dude.
it's ridiculous in the same way that me saying it just does is
Thanks for
ridiculous.
coming up here and lying to everyone. You're a great liar. Yeah.
Is that article you mentioned?
Yeah, primarily The Lord of Non-Contradiction, An Argument for God from Logic by James Anderson and Greg Welty. They really build a case. They argue that logic isn't just floating out there abstractly.
But it's fundamentally dependent on God.
That's their argument, yes.
Yeah.
Metaphysically dependent.
Okay. And for everyone listening, for you, the learner, who likes getting up to speed quickly, but, without feeling totally overwhelmed,
Right.
we're going to take this philosophical argument, which, let's be honest, can sound pretty complex, and we'll break it down.
Look at the digestible parts.
Exactly. We'll focus on the key insights, maybe those aha moments, and some of the surprising angles. Really understand why this is intriguing and what the implications might be.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's start right at the beginning. When we say laws of logic in the context of this paper, what exactly are we talking about?
Okay, yeah, good place to start. So Anderson and Welty, they define these laws of logic as the really basic axiomatic principles of rational thought.
Axiomatic, meaning like foundational.
Assumed.
Foundational, yeah. Principles that govern how statements, things that can be true or false, what philosophers call truth-valued statements, how they relate to each other in ways that reliably lead to truth.
Gotcha. So the bedrock rules for thinking straight. And they give some classic examples, don't they, to make it concrete. They do. They mention the three big ones, usually trace back to Aristotle.
Okay.
There's the law of identity, basically. If something's true, it's true. A is A.
Simple enough.
Then the law of non-contradiction. This is a big one for them. No statement can be both true and false at the same time, in the same respect.
Right. Can't be raining and not raining right here, right now.
Exactly. And the third is the law of excluded middle. Any given statement has to be either true or false. There's no third option, no middle ground.
Okay, those sound, pretty obvious, almost. Hard to argue with.
You think so? But the authors do acknowledge that even these fundamental principles have faced challenges from some philosophers.
Really? Like, people argue against the law of non-contradiction.
Some do, yeah. But here's a really crucial point for their argument. It doesn't actually depend on us accepting those specific 3 laws as the only ones, or even needing those exact formulations.
Ah, okay. So what does it depend on?
It just depends on the idea that there are laws of logic, that there are some fundamental rules governing rational thought and truth. The specific list isn't the main thing.
So it's the existence of a framework, not the precise details of the framework.
Precisely. And they kind of make this point almost rhetorically.
Yeah.
They ask, how could you even rationally debate whether there are laws of logic?
Without using logic in your debate.
Exactly. You'd be assuming the very thing you're trying to deny just by engaging in rational argument. It's sort of self-defeating.
That's a neat point. It really makes you think about the ground rules for any conversation, any argument.
It does.
Okay, so these laws exist in some form. And the authors then say these laws, they are themselves truths.
Yes, that's the next step. Their first main assertion is that the laws of logic are truths. They possess the property of being true.
Like the sky is blue is true. The law of non-contradiction is also true.
Exactly. Whatever else it is, the statement, no proposition can be both true and false, is itself true. It accurately describes a feature of reality, specifically about truth and falsehood.
Okay. And then they bring in this philosophical term, propositions. Why is that important?
See, okay. So, keyword there, how the laws of logic accurately describe reality. If they don't, then how do we know what's true about reality? It's the tool that we use to accurately describe. So, if it's just conceptual, then how can it accurately describe reality, right? That's why we have to ground it.
Right. So philosophers often use the word proposition to talk about the underlying meaning or the content of a statement.
Okay, so the proposition would be the property of the statement that's true. It's the truth bearer. So you have a truth statement is a proposition. But there's a difference between the truth statement and the proposition, right? Because think about it like this. I could write on a piece of paper, the sky is blue. The sky is blue. So I have 2 statements. It says the sky is blue twice. That's 2 statements, but there's only one proposition. So it's like the proposition is this like kind of immaterial truth property thing. That's a proposition. The property of a statement that's true.
The thing that is actually true or false, separate from the specific words or language used to express it.
Ah, okay. Like le ciel est bleu in French
Thanks,
and the
Nate.
sky is blue in English.
They express the same proposition.
Got it. Different sentences, same core truth claim.
Exactly. And the laws of logic, being truths, are understood as propositions in this sense. The law of non-contradiction isn't just the English sentence, it's the underlying concept, the single truth that could be stated in any language.
So it's not just a linguistic convention, it's pointing to something more fundamental.
And that's the idea. It suggests it's a truth about how things are, not just how we talk.
No, what about the objection that maybe these laws aren't truths themselves, but more like relationships between truths? Does that derail the argument?
That's a fair question. And they address it. They say, okay, even if you view them primarily as relations, like how different propositions connect or the structure they have, there still have to be truths about those relations. You still need to be able to state truly how those relations work. And those statements, those truths about the relations, well, those are effectively what we mean by the laws of logic in this context.
So the argument still holds. Okay, so the law of non-contradiction then, it's a truth about truths and falsehoods.
Precisely put, it's a truth about the nature of truth and falsehood themselves. It states a fundamental relationship. No proposition, no truth bearer can have both the property of being true and the property of being false simultaneously.
And this applies across the board to any statement.
Yes,
Universal.
completely general. Doesn't matter if you're talking about physics or history.
So that's important there that these things are universal. That's why I bring up we have universal. So a concrete example of a universal. This isn't the perfect example, but traffic laws, right? That's a concrete universal. It's like in reality, people follow traffic laws, and if people don't follow traffic laws, traffic won't function. If everyone just does whatever they want, traffic won't function. And then we have enforcement. That's the ethics. We have police officer. It's kind of like the ethics who enforces that you ought follow the traffic law or else you'll get a ticket, right? So God's like the police officer, like you ought follow the laws of logic or you're going to hell. So without these concrete universal laws, like the traffic laws, logic wouldn't function. So we need a cosmic police officer, right? Like God is sort of, you could think of a God as like a cosmic police officer who's trying to enforce the rules of truth, the truth law. Without that cosmic police officer, there is no truth. There's no reason to think anything's true or false. Doesn't matter. Because like without the police, you might as well just run the red light because you're not going to get a ticket. Doesn't matter. You might as well speed. There's no reason to follow any traffic law without police. Then traffic don't function. So without police, traffic doesn't function. Without the cosmic logic police of God, logic doesn't function.
Or what you had for breakfast. The law holds for all propositions.
Okay, so they're truths. They're about truths. But then there's this idea of necessity. They aren't just true. They have to be true.
Exactly. This is a really critical step in their argument. They claim these aren't just contingent truths, truths that happen to be the case but could have been otherwise.
Like, the Allies won World War II is true, but we can imagine a scenario where it wasn't. That's contingent.
Right. Logical laws, they argue, are different. They are necessary truths. They couldn't possibly have been false.
So there's no possible way reality could have been structured such that, say, contradictions were fine.
That's what they're arguing.
Right. So it's impossible that there isn't a world where like the earth can exist and not exist at the same time in the same sense. That world does not exist. That's an impossible world. So that means the laws of logic are necessary truths. So in all possible worlds, any world you can imagine, there would have to be the laws of logic because we couldn't have true contradictions. It doesn't. If the earth can exist and not exist at the same time, your world is chaos. Nothing makes sense now.
They use the concept of possible worlds here, basically, different ways reality could have unfolded. And they say the laws of logic are true in every single possible world. You can imagine a world with different physical laws, maybe, but not one where P and not P are both true simultaneously.
But couldn't someone just say they imagine a world with a law of non-contradiction is false?
Well, they'd address that thought. Their counter is that our very understanding of what constitutes a possible world seems tied to logical consistency, especially non-contradiction.
Meaning the idea of possibility itself depends on this law.
Kind of, yeah. How do we distinguish a genuinely possible scenario from just, well, an incoherent jumble of words? Usually it involves checking for consistency. So the idea of a possible world where non-contradiction fails is problematic, perhaps even incoherent itself.
It feels almost self-evident, that necessity.
They suggest.
Yes. So there are, so the guy who wrote the paper that the podcast is about, James Anderson, he debated T-Jump. And T-Jump brought up this issue, like, what about philosophers who deny the law of non-contradiction or the laws of logic are necessary truths? And he said, you know, typically people are going to think laws of logic are necessary truths unless your mind has been polluted by academic philosophy. And so, it's just, I think it's very problematic if you're going to deny that logic is a necessary truth. Because then when we're talking about a possible world, what are you even talking about? Because if contradictions can exist, then wouldn't anything be there? What would it mean to be impossible if there's contradictions? So, and another thing, maybe this is semi-related, but I think is it Samuel Rutherford has an article about possibility. So to even talk about possible and impossible, you would need ultimate context of the ground, a mind that's the ground of being, that through God's omnipotence would flow possibility and impossibility. So it doesn't even make sense to talk about possible, impossible without God. That's another another angle of attack, but Anderson's going with we're talking about grounding logic. So that's not quite real. It's only semi-related, I guess.
It has that quality, yes. Now, they do briefly acknowledge challenges, things like dialetheism, the idea that maybe some contradictions are true, and also Cartesian universal possibilism, which questions the whole idea of necessary truths. But their point remains that for their argument to work, you just need some fundamental logical laws to be necessary truths about truth itself.
Okay, so laws of logic are truths, they're about truths, and they're necessarily true.
Got it.
Now, the next step seems like a big one. They argue these laws actually exist, like really exist.
Okay, so like the key point there is even if you take like, the atheist position, or what did you say, Cartesian, like there's still going to be like these necessary like principles. Like I don't think you can escape. There's no way to escape that to have a logical system. You're going to need these necessary truths, principles. To even sort of like math, like there's necessary truths in maths. So I don't think you could ever defend the position that there are no necessary truths. And really this argument relies on there's just that there being any necessary truth. So it could be a mathematical truth too, which like, so this isn't controversial.
It's not just as ideas in our heads.
Yes. This is where they shift from describing what the laws are, necessary truths propositions, to arguing that they are real entities.
Like tables and chairs exist, or the pyramids exist.
Well, not.
So now we're talking about grounding logic. So logic is an abstraction, yet we need something to make it real because it has real world. They're truths about reality. It has real world implications and applications, etc.
In the same way, they're very clear. They don't mean they're physical, concrete objects, but they argue they have genuine ontological reality. They exist.
Okay, how do they argue for that? Seems like a leap from true to exists.
They offer 4 lines of reasoning. The first one starts with just how we talk, our ordinary language.
How so?
We say things like, there are laws of logic, or the law of non-contradiction is fundamental. When we use phrases like there are X's or X is Y, we usually presuppose that X actually exists.
So the way we naturally speak about them implies they're real things.
That's the suggestion. And they argue the burden of proof should be on the person who wants to say our language is misleading here, that these things don't actually exist, despite us talking as if they do.
True. So just anytime you talk and speak sentences, there's a bunch of metaphysical assumptions that go along with those sentences. And so what they want to do is they're saying like, well, I'm throwing they throw metaphysical punches when they speak, but then they go, well, I'm not in the metaphysical fight. It's like, no, you are in the metaphysical fight. God's a metaphysical issue. There's no neutral territory. So if I have to defend my metaphysics and God, you have to defend your non-God or whatever, non-Christian metaphysics. You can't throw metaphysical punches and say you're not in the metaphysical fight. And then they say we're shifting to the burden of proof when we point out that they're in the fight too. They go, oh, you're shifting the burden of proof. No, you're in the fight. We're in a metaphysical fight. Stop acting. They want to act like they're not in the fight.
Interesting. Okay, what's the second argument? Something about intuition.
Yes, it appeals to a kind of ontological intuition. The basic idea is only things that genuinely exist can have real effects or constraints on us.
Their logic clearly affects how we think, how we argue, what's possible.
Exactly. Logic undeniably influences our cognitive lives, our science, everything. If only existing things have effects and logic has effects, then, well, the conclusion seems to be that logic must exist.
Okay, that makes a certain kind of intuitive sense. What about the third point? It was about verbs like know or believe.
Right, this one's a bit more technical, focusing on the structure of sentences. When we use verbs like know, believe, doubt, often the object of that verb is a proposition, usually introduced by that.
Like, I know that the earth is round.
Precisely. Or in this context, Smith knows that no statement can be both true and false. The argument is that for Smith to know that thing, the thing itself, the proposition, the law of non-contradiction must exist.
You can't know something that doesn't exist.
Basically, yeah. Just like you can't kick a non-existent ball. The structure suggests...
Sure, that's important. So existence and knowledge are reciprocal. So, like, how do I put this? So, like, if something exists, then it's, like, true that something exists, right? And if it's true that something exists, then something actually exists. So they're connected. You couldn't have something exist and then it not be true. And then truth and knowledge are connected, right? So you couldn't have something exist and then it not be true that it exists. Or vice versa. Like it couldn't be true that something exists and then it doesn't actually exist. So they're connected.
So you can't know or doubt a non-existent proposition. Its existence is presupposed by the verb.
Okay, that's subtle but interesting. And the final argument, something about having properties.
Yes, the fourth argument is about property attribution. The principle is only things that exist can possess properties.
Like, this microphone has the property of being black. It has to exist first.
Right. And the laws of logic, as we establish, have the property of being true. Since they have a property, truth, they must exist as the bearers of that property.
So truth is a property and logic has it, therefore logic must exist.
That's the argument. They also tackle the deflationary theory of truth here, the idea that saying P true is just another way of saying P, and that true isn't a real property.
They disagree with that.
They argue against it, suggesting that the proposition that grass is green is true actually does mean something more than just grass is green, implying truth is a genuine property requiring an existing subject.
And they also push back against the idea that they're just like making an abstract concept into a thing, the fallacy of reification.
Exactly. They preempt that objection. They stress, again, they're not saying logical laws are concrete, things like rocks. They're arguing for the real existence of abstract entities. And they point out that just flatly denying the existence of all abstract objects is itself a controversial philosophical stance that needs defending, not just assuming.
Right. So they deny the existence of abstract objects, the atheists, and they want to say typically, not all of them, typically, and they'll be materialists, naturalists, right? So that's a big problem because abstract objects are like no doubt a part of our reality. Things like what? Like justice, the mind, love, beauty. They're denying the existence of these things. Logic, math. How can you deny the existence of these things? We literally use math to build buildings and shit.
Okay, so let's recap the chain so far. Laws of logic are truths, necessary truths, and they actually exist as real, albeit abstract, entities.
Correct.
So if they exist and they are necessary truths, does that mean they exist necessarily?
That's the direct implication, yes. If something is a necessary truth, true in all possible worlds, and it exists, then it must exist in all possible worlds.
Yeah.
Its existence is necessary, just like its truth.
Because if it didn't exist in some possible world, it couldn't be true in that world.
Precisely. Necessary truth implies necessary existence for these entities. They revisit the arguments from ordinary language and property attribution, suggesting these also point towards necessary existence. Yeah. We talk about logic being true in all scenarios, having the property of truth necessarily.
Okay. Real, necessary, abstract entities, not physical. So what kind of thing fits that description? This is where the connection to thoughts comes in, right?
Exactly. This is the pivot point. They introduce the philosophical concept of intentionality.
Intentionality, like intending to do something.
Not quite in the everyday sense. In philosophy, it means aboutness or directedness. Thoughts, beliefs, desires, they're always about something. They point beyond themselves.
My belief that it's Tuesday is about today's date.
Perfect example. Propositions, including the laws of logic, inherently possess this intentionality. The law of non-contradiction is about the relationship between truth and falsehood.
Okay. And they mentioned two aspects of this, directedness and a spectral shape.
Yes. Directedness is the pointing towards. A spectral shape is about how something is presented. Think of their Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens example.
Right. Same person. But thinking Mark Twain wrote Tom Sawyer is a different thought than Samuel Clemens wrote Tom Sawyer because they present the subject under a different aspect, a different description.
Exactly. That way of presenting is the aspectual shape. Now, the crucial claim is that this kind of intrinsic intentionality, this inherent aboutness and a spectral shape, is the distinctive mark of the mental.
Of thoughts.
Of thoughts, yes.
Yeah.
Beliefs, ideas, concepts. Physical things, they argue, don't have this intrinsic intentionality. A book is about something only because a mind intended it to be, wrote it, or reads it. Its intentionality is derived.
So a rock isn't inherently about anything.
Right. but a thought is inherently about its object.
Okay, I think I follow. So since propositions, and therefore the laws of logic, are intrinsically intentional.
The conclusion they draw is that propositions are best understood as being mental in nature. They are essentially thoughts.
Okay, so what we're just saying here is that propositions have aboutness or intent, and physical things do not have aboutness or intent. So like a tree isn't true or false. Like the tree isn't more true than the car. Physical things just exist. They have no aboutness or intent. But then the proposition, the tree is in the front yard, that has intentionality, aboutness. And that's more like a mental substance, like a thought. So physical things aren't true or false. Only like mental substances can be like true or false.
Wow. Okay. So laws of logic, necessary truths, necessary existing abstract entities, thoughts.
That's the chain they've built.
But whose thoughts? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? If they exist necessarily, they can't be my thoughts or yours.
Exactly, because we are contingent beings. We might not have existed. Our thoughts are contingent. But the laws of logic, they argue, exist necessarily true in all possible worlds.
So they...
Okay, so there's this distinction between necessary and contingent. So necessary means it's true in every world imaginable. Contingent means it could be otherwise. So for example, like I, as a human being, I'm contingent. I don't need to exist. I could stop existing tomorrow. My parents could have never met and I might never have existed. So humans are contingent. We're not necessary. But logic is necessary. It has to exist in every possible world. And since our minds are contingent, they can't like explain a necessary truth. So we need a necessary truth or a necessary mind for a necessary truth. Contingent mind can't get you to necessary truth. Only necessary mind can get you to necessary truth. Because again, truth is mental substance.
Must be the thoughts of a mind that also exist necessarily.
That's the deduction. These necessary, true, existing thoughts must belong to a mind whose existence is not contingent, but necessary. A necessarily existent mind.
And a necessarily existent mind. What is that?
Well, they argue that a mind implies a person, a thinking subject.
Yeah.
So a necessarily existent mind implies a necessarily existent person, and a necessarily existent personal thinking non-physical being.
Is what we typically understand as God.
That is the connection they make, yes.
So that's the argument. It flows from logic is true, all the way to logic is the thought of a necessary mind, i.e. God.
That's the full chain of reasoning they present. Laws of logic are necessary truths about truths, which means they are necessary true propositions, which exist as real non-physical entities, which possess intentionality, suggesting they are essentially thoughts, necessarily existent true thoughts, which require a necessarily existent mind. The mind of a necessarily existent personal spiritual being we call God.
They're careful to say it's not, absolute mathematical proof.
No, it's presented as a philosophical argument, a case to be considered, but potentially a strong one.
And the implications are pretty staggering if you accept it.
There really are. Firstly, it reframes logic itself. The laws of logic aren't some abstract standard that God merely conforms to.
They're God's thoughts.
Divine thoughts about the essential relations between divine thoughts. Logic conforms to God because logic is God thinking.
And that leads to that irony they mentioned.
Right, the implication that any logical argument, even one attempting to disprove God's existence, relies on the laws of logic. But if this argument holds, those very laws are grounded in the divine mind.
So using logic assumes the existence of the very thing you might be trying to argue against.
That's the paradoxical conclusion, yeah. They draw a parallel to moral arguments for God.
Where people argue that objective moral laws require a divine lawgiver.
Exactly. This is similar, but for logical laws. It suggests God is the ultimate ground, not just for morality, but for rationality itself.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up for the listener, for you, the learner, what's the big takeaway here?
I think the main thing is seeing this potential really deep connection proposed between something seemingly abstract and impersonal, the rules of logic, and something profoundly personal and necessary, the mind of God.
It challenges us maybe to see the order and rationality in the universe not just as brute facts, but as potentially rooted in something or someone intentional.
Yeah, it shifts the perspective. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on, doesn't it?
Definitely. Like if logic is in some sense God's thought, how does that change how we view knowledge? In some sense God's thought, how does that change how we view knowledge or reasoning or even God?
Could exploring logic itself become a way, maybe an unexpected way, of exploring ultimate reality? It opens up interesting avenues.
It really does. And obviously, we've just scratched the surface here. This intersection of logic, metaphysics, philosophy of religion, it's incredibly rich.
Absolutely. There's so much more to explore. Thinkers like Plantinga, Aquinas, the different views on necessity and propositions.
So we definitely encourage listeners to dig deeper if this sparked something. What parts of the argument stood out most? What questions does it raise for you personally? That's where the real learning continues.
Couldn't agree more.
Amen. Plantinga. Yeah, you can find that podcast on. I have a bunch of podcasts on my YouTube. I'm going to be uploading like these AI podcasts of papers that me and Darth. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, almost every single claim on this background can be proven false. One, Christianity is not objectively proven. Science directly counters with Christian belief that the earth is 6,000 years old. So let's talk about that.
Scientific truths absolute or provisional?
Well, no, there's sufficient evidence to prove these things.
Well, yeah, but science could discover new evidence like tomorrow that proves the earth is 8,000 years old.
Well, no, you can't prove that something is not.
Science can change all the time. Sure can. Science, 100 years ago they said the earth was 3 billion years old. And now they say it's 4.5 billion. So they were wrong by 1 point. That's a lot to be wrong. Don't you think they're wrong by 1.5 billion?
So where does the Bible find actual evidence to prove that the earth is 6,000 years old?
Well, the Bible would speak with divine authority of our Lord.
You said it's objectively proven. That's not divine authority. You said objectively. Is it objectively true that gravity exists?
Well, yes.
That's not a trick question.
But
yes.
But for that fact to be objective, we have to have God. The fact won't be objective without God.
No, I'm saying like from a human perspective, we objectively know that gravity exists because when you jump.
No, but because we need God to know that objectively.
We don't need God to know that. When you jump off a building, you know that gravity is pulling you down.
Okay, but without, I'm trying to think on it. So like, gravity is a fact, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, it can be like the mind of man that first interprets the fact on your model. So we're going to need the mind of God to first interpret the fact, or else the fact's interpreted by humans. If the facts are just interpreted by humans, that means humans just invent facts. So they wouldn't really.
We're not talking about the interpretations, though. We're talking about the actual reality that gravity exists, right? Because the premise of Christianity is that we have one God, one creator that created the universe and everything in it. So the reality of that has not been proven.
Yeah, but we have different facts. A fact requires a paradigm. You can't have a fact in isolation. Facts are theory laden.
It's a universal fact that gravity exists. You don't need a paradigm to understand that when you jump off a building, gravity is going to pull you down. That's a fact.
Yeah, did that fact come from a human mind?
No, because the fact is proof of the universe. Like it's literally in the construct of the universe. That's how the universe is built.
Yeah, but it requires an interpretive scheme or a framework. You have to use reason to figure out the fact. So that's a framework.
So you're saying that gravity is based on how you interpret it?
Yes. Every fact requires interpretation.
All right, so let me ask you this question then.
Oh my
What
God.
makes Christianity more objectively proven than all the other religions?
In Christianity, we have an objective mind, the mind of God, to independently evaluate and interpret reality. If you deny that, you only have a human mind to interpret reality, which makes all facts just made up by humans. So you don't
Well,
have
no, I'm sure every religion believes they have the mind of God. Buddhists will say the same thing. I'm saying, what is special about Christianity objectively that makes it right over all these other religions?
because only Christianity has revealed the God with the unique attribute set. So no other God has that attribute set, and that attribute set is indispensable. Like breathing air is indispensable. So you need that attribute set to have like logic, science, debate, anything. So
you're saying that Christianity is valid because Jesus Christ came to us in human form.
because if you deny Christianity, you'll deny one or more of the attributes as a necessary precondition for truth, knowledge, and science.
Wait, no, truth has to be proven. You just agreed that truth has to be proven.
Requires
Right? So
an ultimate foundation.
what is the evidence for, like, let's look at Greek mythology. Today we can all agree that Greek mythology is a bunch of hogwash, right? That's the reason why they moved away from that. But back then that was their true interpretation of God.
Every non-Christian position shares the same property of autonomous human reasoning. And that means reasoning without aid from God. We must accept God's aid in order to reason. We couldn't reason without the aid of God.
Wait. So you believe that the Bible is 100% the word of God? There's no man-made things in the Bible.
Yeah, the Bible is the self-attesting word of God. Yeah.
So do you think the creator that created all people, and scientifically proven he created African people first, so that just dissuades the fact that Christianity is a true religion?
But you keep saying what you're arguing here is scientism. You're treating science as if it's the absolute truth, but science isn't the absolute truth. The word of God speaks with a higher authority than science. Because
All right,
science.
so let me get it set. All right, so what are some things that you believe to be true about the world today? Like, just give me one absolute truth that everybody can agree on.
You're going to hell.
That's an opinion, but give me just one, like, in regular life without Christianity.
1 + 2.
All right, no, that could be debated because that's, like you said, it's up to interpretation. But I'm saying, like, what's one absolute?
That is not debatable. You're just nuts. Now you're just bickering. See, God's so obvious they have to just bicker and lie. Oh, 1 + 1 = 2 is debatable. Oh, atheism. Because of atheism, maybe 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. Atheism. Yeah. Oh, totally. Welcome, Owl.
That was something to join into.
Well, this is what they do.
Well, I'm just here to have a good
do you think
conversation.
okay, that last guy said 1 + 1 might not equal 2. Do you agree with that last guess? Do you think that last guess should be locked up in some sort of asylum?
Well, that whole 1 + 1 not equaling 2 thing, didn't that start with like that actor from the first
Answer
Iron
my
Man
question,
movie?
you son of a bitch!
Yeah, you're talking about the dude who said about 1 + 1, right?
He said 1 + 1 = 2 is debatable. Isn't that a crazy thing to say, or do you agree with your fellow atheist?
No, I agree with what you're saying. 1 + 1 = 2, and that's just a mathematical truth. That whole thing started with
Exactly.
that one. Yeah, but I'm here just because I guess I like to seek different things. I like to learn different things. So the first prompt just interests me about Christianity being objectively proven. I would love for you to prove that for me.
Yeah, sure. So, like, we do the transcendental argument for God, where we say that any non-Christian worldview or any non-Christian system fails to account for logic, morality, and knowledge. Only the Christian worldview.
So I understand the tag argument. I think while the tag argument does provide some good philosophical arguments, I believe that it is not good for two different things, and that one is convincing people. Because if someone's already unconvinced, what they want is more so evidence, arguments. Philosophical arguments
So,
aren't evidence. So,
but that doesn't. But that means that like globe Earth arguments are bad because they don't convince matter. Does that make sense to you?
Can you repeat that one more time?
I used to debate flat earthers, and they were I could give them whatever proof you could imagine, a million proofs of the globe, and they were never convinced. So there, by your reasoning, all my globe proofs are bad proofs because they don't convince flat earthers. The point of tag is that everyone has a confirmation bias. The flat earther is biased. They look at every evidence and they interpret it flat earth, right? So
My only problem with
the atheist has a bias, just like the flat earther, and they interpret all evidence atheist. And all we're doing as tag is trying to get you to admit you're a bias person. Everyone has a bias. I have a bias for Christ.
Well, yeah, everyone does have a bias, but the problem is, at least with the correlation between the flat Earth and the tag argument, is you can actually provide physical evidence for why the Earth isn't flat.
Yeah,
you
and I
cannot
can provide evidence, physical evidence for God, and you're going to sit there and not be convinced. Yeah, you're talking. Could you talk in a world without the principle of the uniformity of nature? No, you couldn't. What explains the principle of the uniformity of nature? The Bible. Does anything else explain the principle of the uniformity of nature? No. So
what do you mean by the principle of the uniformity of nature? What do you mean by that? That
the future resembles the past, that there's patterns and order. If there was no patterns, we couldn't talk. Language relies on patterns. So patterns require the uniformity of nature. And that's only in the Bible. There's no empirical or rational evidence or proof for that. So you rely on the clues of the Bible to even talk. That's a physical, tangible proof. There you go.
We rely on the Bible to talk.
You rely on the Bible to talk as a necessary precondition for you to talk.
Okay. All right. I guess how would you demonstrate that?
I just did. I just told you. You demonstrate it when you just talked. You just talked. You just demonstrated it. That's
well, no, I understand what you're saying, but
that's the demonstration.
No, I understand.
Thanks for demonstrating God. Thank you.
No. But my problem is that I can easily go, well, the reason you're talking is because of the Quran, and the Quran must be true. Therefore, that it's very similar.
No, Quran. Allah cannot explain the principle of the uniformity of nature because he's capricious. He's not unchanging like the Christian God, so he could just change the uniformity of nature tomorrow.
According to Muslims, he is all-knowing, unchanging, all-powerful.
That's not the Muslim position. I just gave you a defeater. And you're going to just repeat yourself because you have nothing, because of course you have nothing, because atheism is nothing, and God is the shit.
I'm not atheist.
What are you?
I'm agnostic, and I guess you could say spiritual in a way.
Oh.
I used to be Christian.
Well, you are.
I was Christian. Wait, what?
You are an atheist.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I believe there very well could be a God. I'm unconvinced it's the Christian God.
Right. If I say God probably exists, I'm an atheist. Did you know that?
Now, I understand the argument. It's the typical Darth Dog and script argument. I don't agree with that concept, no.
Okay, but it doesn't... See, logic isn't what you do or do not agree with, because logic is a universal truth. So you can not agree with the argument, but that's not a defeater from the argument. Okay? Do you understand?
Okay. I mean...
Right. So do you have a defeater for the argument? Because it's like... When you talk about facts, it's either going to be the facts are created by God or not, right? Do you think God's necessary for facts? No, you don't. So therefore, you're an
do I think God? No,
you don't think God is
I might. Let me explain as to why. Okay, so To answer this, I believe there are two possibilities. For example, so if you go to the 1+1 scenario from before, 1+1 = 2. That is a fact. We know that. We don't need God for that. However,
Yes, we
if
do.
logic is
Stop.
required,
We do need
no,
God
no,
for
no, hold on,
that.
hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done. If logic and reasoning is required to come from God, then no matter my views of God or anyone's views of God, that is the case no matter what, even unknowingly. So we can unknowingly, that can be unknowingly the case. I think that is a possibility. That could be a possibility where that is unknowingly the case.
No, God is necessary. So you either accept that God's necessary or not. There's no middle ground on God because he's ultimate reality. You can't be neutral to God. There's no neutral territory. So you're just gaslighting yourself. But that's
No,
what God,
I
God
know.
allows you to gaslight yourself and fool yourself if you reject him. So this is all that's happened.
No.
Yeah.
I very well believe that there could be a God. I'm
That's a
unconvinced
denial
it's
of
the
God.
Christian God.
That's a polite denial of God. That's a denial of God. Because God is the necessary mind that's the ground of being. You deny the necessary mind. You say it's possible, probable.
No, here's the
That's a
thing.
denial. That's implicit denial. You're
That's
philosophically confused. You're just confused. You're just confused.
no. I'm
You're just confused. Yeah.
no.
You're
No. Let's have a
confused.
good
I
conversation.
get
Let's
it.
have a polite conversation.
I
Let's
get
have a
it. You're
polite
not a
conversation.
logical person. You're not
Let's
a
have a
deep
polite
thinker.
conversation.
Yeah, I get it. You can't think too hard. Yeah, I get it. You're
Let's
confused.
have a polite conversation.
I am
Come on.
having a polite conversation.
Then stop mocking me. Let's have a polite conversation.
Well, stop bullshitting me.
Listen, I'm not bullshitting. I'm saying that I believe that. No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. To say God probably, do you understand? To say God probably exists is a denial of God because God is
Okay,
not.
let me ask you something. If I say that there's probably someone in the house next door, am I denying that there's someone in the house next door?
Is someone in the next door a necessary being that's the ground of reality?
Well,
is that a category error then? Oh, are you bullshitting me? Yes. Can you stop with your rhetorical bullshit and just be real?
I am being real. I
You
think
aren't
that
being
there's
real. You're
possibly a
being
God.
fake. You're an inauthentic faker. You're fake.
I'm not faking. I think
You
that
are
there could be a God.
faking.
There was a reason. There was a reason I was Christian.
Bro. All right. I don't know. You're not willing to be realistic. So okay. Welcome.
Hi, Mars.
Hello.
How you been?
Welcome. Fine.
Hi, Mars.
Hello. There's an
How
echo.
you been?
Oh my God. That was an echo. That was really bad. Why am I mad? I'm not mad. It's just I'm being lied to. That's all. Just being lied to, man. Okay, but if it echoes, I wanna make lunch. Well, okay, you fix it?
I think so.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, I think I had a network lag. How you been?
I'm doing well.
Good. Hey, so all right, so kind of piggybacking off the last guy. So if I grant you that there must be a uniformity of truth in the universe, and that source would be God.
You don't have to grant that because you talking presupposes it. It has to be necessarily true.
Yeah, that's fine. So then my argument then would be, how can you defend the Christian God when his revelation is incomplete? Meaning, throughout history, the revelation from the Bible has been targeted to a specific group of people for the majority of the time, whereas then you have the rest of the world who would not on their own come to the same conclusion of a triune God that was revealed through Christ.
You don't have to know the triune God because he's revealed in creation, and when you encounter other people and you serve other people, Christ is revealed in that service.
But if I'm not drawing to the conclusion of a triune God, and that I would not be able to name that as Christ.
No, the Bible says Everyone, you don't have to know his name is Jesus. So everyone knows God. Like everyone knows there's an ultimate creator that created them. So everyone knows that. So everyone knows God, and people will be judged by what they know. They won't be judged by what they don't know.
So then you're arguing against the necessity of accepting Christ as part of salvation.
No, they can know Christ through their encounter with others. When they serve others and love others, they can know Christ. If you haven't had the gospel, but if someone has the gospel, they don't have that option.
But wouldn't that be an incomplete revelation? Because the whole point of Christ coming to earth was to know him specifically. It talks about a personal relationship.
We're not judged on our intellect and our knowledge. Like everyone has a different journey, and they're judged by what they know, not what they don't know.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but then you're saying, then why would Christ be why would it be necessary for God then to come to earth to reveal himself to us? Then why would that be the necessity of the plan?
Because so when we rebelled in the garden, that created a barrier between humans and God, so we couldn't have a relationship with God. Only through like sacrificial atonement, like what they would have to sacrifice animals once a year to have an encounter with God. And so Jesus breaks that barrier. He's like the ultimate perfect sacrifice that allows us now to have a relationship with God through Christ.
So then why is there a necessity to preach the gospel?
So people can have a relationship with Jesus and be saved.
But you just said that they could be saved and have their relationship with Jesus without ever being exposed to the Bible itself or the triune God directly. So then it makes everything that happened in the New Testament unnecessary.
It's not. How would that be unnecessary? That doesn't follow. There's still Christ.
Because the gospel is that Christ came, God became man, and he became man, died on the cross, and then the action for people after that is to then go make that known to the rest of the world in order for them to be saved.
The Bible says, but the Bible says he will be a light to everyone. So everyone knows Christ. There isn't one person on the planet that doesn't know Christ. And we save them by teaching them the gospel and the good news.
But
not that complicated.
But you're saying they could be saved without that being known, that being made known to them fully.
No, they can't. It's known to everyone. Everyone has different. Darth knows more about me than Christ than I do. Does that mean he's more saved? Level of knowledge is irrelevant. The fact is everyone knows Christ. The degree of your knowledge is irrelevant.
But then again, that gets
But you're stupid.
Well, you know I'm not stupid, Mars.
Dude, you're frustrating me because you just keep badgering this point. You're wrong.
Because you're contradicting yourself.
Okay, I have to quit. I'm gonna get banned because I want to like yell at you really bad.